One day, I just stopped. I submitted my resignation, turned off all notifications, packed a small bag, and simply disappeared for a week. Why did I leave my job? Because I was tired of waking up just to exist in a routine that was slowly draining my soul. Why disappear? Because when you're constantly surrounded by noise, the only way to hear your own voice again is to step away from everyone else. Did this one-week escape change my entire life? Honestly, no. The world didn't magically fix itself, and my problems didn't disappear. But it changed the way I look at everything. And sometimes, a change of perspective is all you really need to start over. The transition didn't happen with a dramatic breakdown or a loud argument. It happened in complete, heavy silence. On a suffocating Friday afternoon, surrounded by rows of flickering monitors and people rushing past to meet endless deadlines, I stared at a drafted resignation email. My heart was pounding, but my mind was strangely calm. I pressed send, slammed my laptop shut, and left my access badge on the empty desk. The small click of that laptop closing felt like a quiet explosion inside my chest. I walked down to the basement, strapped my backpack onto the back of my motorbike, and kicked off the kickstand. As I twisted the throttle and rode out into the blinding afternoon sun, leaving the smoggy, congested city behind, a surge of overwhelming panic mixed with pure adrenaline hit me. There was no concrete plan, no booked hotel, and no clear destination, just a long, open road winding into the misty mountains, and the sudden, terrifying realization that for the first time in years, I was completely free. My sanctuary for the week turned out to be a small, secluded wooden cabin perched high on a misty pine hill. There were no traffic sirens, no alarm clocks, and no pinging notifications. Just the relentless howl of the mountain wind and the quiet rustle of ancient trees. But peace didn't bring immediate relief, it brought withdrawal. For the first 48 hours, the deafening silence felt almost hostile. My right hand reflexively twitched toward my pocket every few minutes, searching for a phone I had deliberately switched off. My mind, so accustomed to constant chaos and urgent demands, began to invent phantom anxieties. What if I missed a critical update? What if people thought I had failed? Stripped of my corporate title and daily routine, I felt utterly naked. Sitting by the window on that cold night, clutching a steaming mug of tea, I realized a frightening truth. I wasn't just addicted to my job, I was terrified of being alone with my own thoughts. By the fourth day, something subtle shifted inside me. The phantom vibrations in my pocket stopped, and the tight knot in my chest slowly began to loosen. As the mental noise subsided, the world around me suddenly burst into vivid focus. I found myself noticing things I had ignored for years. The rich, earthy scent of damp soil after a morning rain, the gentle warmth of sunrise filtering through pine needles, and the simple joy of sipping coffee without frantically checking emails. I spent hours wandering aimlessly along quiet, winding dirt trails, listening to the soft crunch of dry leaves under my boots. I had slow, meaningful chats with local elders, whose lives weren't dictated by calendars or deadlines. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't rushing toward the next milestone. I was just present. On the final evening, as the rain tapped softly against the cabin roof, I packed my backpack to head back. The one-week escape had come to an end. Did I suddenly find all the answers to my life? Did my bank account miraculously grow? Or did my future problems vanish into thin air? Absolutely not. The city I was returning to was still just as fast, competitive, and demanding as I had left it. But I was no longer the same person who had fled it in panic. Disappearing for a week didn't solve my life, but it reminded me that I am more than just my job, my output, or other people's expectations. Quitting wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a courageous step to reclaim my own life. As I started my motorbike and rode down the misty hill toward the city lights, I knew the road ahead would still be tough, but this time I was finally breathing with my own rhythm. During those middle days of the week, time began to stretch out in ways I hadn't experienced since childhood. Without meetings filling up my calendar or a boss constantly checking on my progress, the day felt limitless. At first, this vast openness was overwhelming, but gradually I replaced my old habits with simpler, grounding routines. I woke up with the natural sunlight instead of an abrasive alarm, made my own breakfast from scratch, and sat hours reading under the shade of pine trees. For the first time in years, I was no longer eating just to fuel a working body or sleeping just to survive another workday. I was doing things simply because they brought me peace. On the fifth afternoon, while sitting at a small roadside coffee stall, I struck up a conversation with an old local man who spent his days carving wooden souvenirs. When I shared that I had just quit my job and fled the city, expecting judgment or pity, he simply smiled, took a sip of his tea, and said something that struck me to the core. "A tree cannot grow new leaves if it refuses to drop the old ones." His words echoed in my mind for hours. I realized how much I had been holding on to out of fear of uncertainty, fear of lagging behind, fear of not measuring up to society's standards. I had been clinging to a dying leaf, too terrified to let go and trust that new growth would eventually come. On my last night at the cabin, I sat down under the warm glow of a desk lamp, opened a fresh notebook, and began writing a letter to the version of myself from 5 years ago. I apologized for pushing my body past its limits, for ignoring the constant headaches, and for trading my mental peace for titles that never truly mattered. But I also thanked that past self for staying strong enough to bring me to this exact moment, a moment where I finally had the courage to stop, listen, and heal. As I closed the notebook, I felt a heavy, invisible weight lift off my shoulders. I was no longer angry at my past choices or terrified of my uncertain future. I was simply at peace with who I was right now. As I packed my belongings on the final morning, I noticed something strange. My backpack hadn't changed, but it felt remarkably lighter. I wasn't just packing clothes and a camera, I was leaving behind the invisible baggage I had carried for years, the constant need for validation, the obsession with productivity, and the relentless fear of falling behind. I realized that the true purpose of disappearing wasn't to run away from my problems, but to create enough space to see them clearly. I wasn't returning to the city to resume the exact same race. I was returning with a clear boundary, knowing when to work, when to rest, and when to protect my inner peace above all else. Riding down the mountain pass as the city skyline slowly emerged through the clouds, the air grew warmer and the noise gradually returned. But inside, everything remained still. I knew the rent was still due, the job search would be tough, and people would keep asking, "So, what's your next plan?" But for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to have all the answers mapped out. I didn't need a grand, flawless master plan. I just needed to take the very next step with honesty and intention. Leaving a stable career to vanish into the woods for a week didn't fix my whole life in 7 days, but it gave me back the most valuable thing I had lost along the way, the freedom to choose my own path. If you're watching this while sitting at a desk that feels like a cage, feeling completely exhausted and lost, please remember, it's okay to take a break. Pausing isn't quitting, and choosing your sanity over a career path that drains you is never a mistake. You don't need to hand in a resignation letter tomorrow or disappear to the mountains, but you do need to listen to that quiet voice inside asking for space to breathe. Life is too short to live it solely on someone else's terms or spend every day just waiting for the weekend. Take care of yourself, prioritize your peace, and have the courage to write a new chapter whenever you're ready. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Take a deep breath, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next adventure.